Imagine waking up one morning not to the usual sounds of your city, but to a silence that's quickly shattered. A silence replaced by a murmur, then the roar of millions, not just in one city or even one country, but everywhere. What if on a single unbelievable day, massive protests blew up in every major city across the entire globe? One day, that's all it might take for the world as we know it to just stop. Forget your morning commute, your daily grind, the usual hum of the stock market. Instead, picture every street in every city, from Tokyo to Times Square, Lagos to London, absolutely packed with people. Their faces etched with frustration, their voices crying out for change. This isn't some movie script. This is a journey into a stark possibility, a world pushed to its edge by pressures already bubbling away just beneath the surface. So what could possibly light such a global firestorm? Well, the kindling is already here, dry and stacked high. Crippling economic inequality isn't some distant theory anymore. It's a daily, bitter reality for billions. Back in 2023, the average income in sub-Saharan Africa was a mere 240 euros a month. In North America, over 3,500 euros. That's a shocking 1 to 15 difference. And even within countries, the gap just keeps getting wider. Worldwide, the richest 10% of people earn more than half of all pre-tax national income. In places like South Africa, that top 10% grabs as much as 65% of the national income. This isn't just about numbers, it's about lives, about chances, and that nagging feeling that the whole system is rigged. Alongside this money gap, there's a huge crisis of people feeling like they have no voice. A survey across 36 nations in early 2024 found that a median of 54% of adults think the gap between rich and poor is a very big problem. And a median of 60% believe that rich people having too much political sway is a major reason for this inequality. People feel ignored, like no one's representing them. Globally, a median of 74% think their elected officials just don't care what ordinary folks think. And 42% feel like no political party truly gets them. When people feel this powerless, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. And then you've got the calls for social justice, human rights, and environmental action getting louder every year. Movements against systemic racism, for gender equality, and demanding we finally do something serious about climate change are already global. Technology, especially social media, acts like a nervous system for all this frustration. It can turn small, isolated sparks of anger into a coordinated global blaze almost overnight. We've seen how movements can explode online, totally bypassing old school media and getting huge numbers of people on board. In 2024 alone, there were over 80,000 incidents linked to protests and riots in just the top 20 countries. That tells you how much unrest is simmering. And get this, more than 160 significant anti-government protests have erupted worldwide in the 12 months leading up to June 2025. This isn't just us guessing. These are the documented pressures building up in our world. The real question is, what happens when they all boil over at the exact same time everywhere? The day starts like any other, but it doesn't stay that way. First, a trickle of posts online, then a flood. Hashtags like hashtag global uprising, hashtag our turn, hashtag enough start trending everywhere. At the same time, in city after city, people begin to gather. Not just hundreds, not even thousands. We're talking tens, even hundreds of thousands. The sheer scale is almost impossible to imagine. It's completely overwhelming. Picture it, Times Square not filled with tourists, but with a sea of New Yorkers demanding economic justice. The Champs-Élysées in Paris not with shoppers, but with Parisians fed up with political stagnation. The streets of New Delhi, Buenos Aires, Cairo, Sydney, all looking exactly the same. The immediate impact? Paralysis. Public transport grinds to a halt. Airports become useless islands, all flights grounded. Global supply chains, already pretty shaky, would just snap. Those just-in-time delivery systems that stock our supermarket shelves, Silent. Schools close, businesses shut their doors. The whole complex dance of daily life, the one that keeps economies and societies running, just stops. Emergency services would be stretched past their breaking point, an early warning that systems are collapsing. And the internet, while a tool for organizing, would also become a battlefield of truth versus lies, fanning the flames of an already chaotic situation. The world's financial markets, they'd go into a terrifying nosedive. The Dow, the FTSE, the Nikkei, all flashing bright red. The price of oil, gold, and other basics would become wildly unpredictable as global trade just freezes. International trade, the very lifeblood of our modern economy, would effectively stop. The economic damage would hit trillions within days, a shock unlike anything our global system, built on constant movement and buying things, has ever seen. How would governments react to something this massive, this unprecedented? Well, there wouldn't be one single answer. You'd see a whole range of responses, different from region to region, regime to regime. Some, maybe in countries with a longer history of democracy, might try to talk first, call for calm, maybe promise some reforms. But even they would be swamped by the sheer, leaderless nature of a truly global uprising. I mean, who do you even negotiate with when everyone is the leader? Other governments, especially the more authoritarian ones, would probably crack down hard and fast. We've seen it before. Tiananmen Square, the Hong Kong crackdowns. Now imagine that in every major city. The images getting out, even with internet blackouts and censorship, would be horrific. Tear gas, riot police, soldiers deployed against their own unarmed people. And this repression meant to stop the protests could easily backfire, making people even angrier and the crisis even deeper. Internationally, things would be grim. Alliances would be seriously tested. Would nations step in to protect citizens in other countries? Or would everyone just hide behind the idea of national sovereignty? The United Nations, already struggling with its own legitimacy and effectiveness, might find itself totally powerless. Its calls for peace just lost in the global noise. Those global governance structures, the ones often criticized for being out of touch or run by a few powerful states, would face their ultimate test. And this wouldn't just be a political or economic crisis. It would be a humanitarian disaster. With supply chains broken, getting food, medicine, and basic services to people in countless cities would become a desperate struggle. The very fabric of society would start to tear as uncertainty and fear took over. Days turn into a week. The initial shock starts to wear off, replaced by a grim new reality. The protests haven't faded away. In some places, they've gotten even bigger, fueled by harsh government crackdowns or the growing realization that this is a shared global struggle. This is the crossroads, that peak moment where the future hangs by a thread. Do governments start to collapse? In countries where leaders weren't trusted anyway, where corruption was out of control and people had lost faith, the sheer pressure of these massive, sustained, leaderless protests could be too much. We might see a domino effect. Regimes toppling one after another, leaving behind power vacuums and even more chaos. Or do governments, just to save their own skins, try to come up with some kind of unified global response? Maybe a desperate emergency summit of world leaders, whoever's still in charge, trying to work out a common plan. But what kind of plan? Would it be a coordinated global lockdown, a worldwide crackdown on their own people? Or could it just possibly be a moment where everyone wakes up? A realization that the old ways just don't work anymore. The alternative is terrifying, a slide into widespread, chaotic conflict. If security forces start to break apart, if local militias or armed groups pop up to grab power, the protest could turn into something far more violent and destructive. Cities could become battlegrounds, not just between protesters and the state, but between different groups fighting for control. This is the point of maximum tension. The world holds its breath. Does this global uprising completely shatter the existing order, leading to an unknown and potentially terrifying emptiness? Or can this unprecedented global cry for change actually force a fundamental shift in how humanity governs itself? Assuming the world doesn't immediately spiral into total anarchy, the period after this peak of global protest would be one of serious soul-searching. Humanity would be forced to look its deepest divisions right in the eye, now that they're out in the open for everyone to see. The old order, with all its built-in inequalities and unfair power balances, would be broken beyond repair, or at least severely damaged. The economic landscape? Decimated. Rebuilding trust in banks, restarting global trade, just making sure people have basic necessities. These would be colossal tasks. The very idea of wealth might even change. The shared experience of the uprising could lead to new ways of local cooperation and sharing resources simply because people have to. Neighbors helping neighbors. Communities organizing to provide what the broken centralized systems can't anymore. Socially, the impact would be just as huge. The protests would have created some unlikely friendships, but also exposed some bitter, old wounds. Racial, ethnic, and religious tensions may be temporarily smoothed over by the common cause of the uprising, could flare up again with a vengeance, especially if resources become scarce. On the other hand, the shared struggle might have built a new sense of global citizenship, a feeling that our fates are all connected. The psychological toll would be immense. The trauma of the protests, the loss of normal life, the fear and uncertainty that would stick around for generations. But alongside it, maybe there'd be a sense of empowerment, the knowledge that ordinary people, when they stand together, have extraordinary power to shake things up and demand change. How we talk about things publicly would be forever different, with citizens far less likely to just passively accept what far-off authorities tell them. This reckoning would be a painful, chaotic, and deeply reflective time. With the illusion of stability gone, humanity would have to ask itself some fundamental questions. How on earth did we get here? And more importantly, where do we go now? So, what rises from the ashes of this global fire? Could this be the start of a genuinely new world order? Or just a different kind of chaos? The long-term consequences are anyone's guess, but the potential for radical change is undeniable. One possibility is a complete overhaul of how the world is run. The old institutions, having failed so spectacularly, might be replaced or drastically reformed to be more inclusive, more representative, and actually responsive to people. Maybe we'd see a global system where the voices of ordinary citizens, not just governments or big corporations, have a real say in the decisions that affect their lives. Policy changes that once seemed impossible, like a universal basic income, truly fair global taxes, or climate action laws that actually have teeth, might suddenly become political must-haves. However, the road to a fairer world is full of dangers. The power vacuums left by collapsed states could be filled by new kinds of dictatorships, maybe even ones that are more tech-savvy and repressive than before. We could see increased surveillance, justified as a way to prevent future unrest, becoming a permanent part of life. Society could end up even more polarized, with the protests making divisions deeper instead of healing them. There's also the chance that the new order is just a long period of disorder, a world broken up into self-sufficient, maybe fearful regional groups, with global cooperation becoming a distant memory. The very interconnectedness that allowed the protest to spread in the first place could be deliberately taken apart. And yet, even in a fractured world, the memory of this global uprising would stick around. It would be a permanent warning to any future power structure about what happens when you ignore mass discontent. It could inspire a new generation of activists, smarter, tougher, always pushing for a fairer share of power and resources. The long-term legacy? It could be a world more tuned in to the cries of its people, or one that's just better at silencing them. It could kick off an era of unheard of global cooperation, or one of deep, bitter division. The only thing we can say for sure is that after a day like that, nothing would ever be the same. A single day of massive worldwide protests. It's a thought that's both terrifying and for some pretty compelling. It's a scenario that forces us to take a hard look at the world we live in right now. Its deep-seated inequalities, its broken political systems, its simmering frustrations. While the idea of such global chaos is daunting, the issues that could actually fuel it are undeniably real and very much present. This thought experiment isn't a prediction. It's meant to make you think. It challenges us to consider how stable our global systems really are and the very real human cost of widespread economic despair and feeling like you have no voice. The world is more interconnected than ever before, and so are its problems and maybe, just maybe, its solutions. What happens in one city, one country, doesn't stay there anymore. The ripples spread. What if those ripples became a tidal wave? What would it take for humanity to genuinely change course? Perhaps that's a question worth thinking about before the streets themselves provide the answer. What do you think would be the most immediate consequence of a global event like this? What kind of new world order could actually emerge from it all? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this exploration interesting, please give this video a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the critical what-ifs that are shaping our future. Think about it. What role would you play? What choices would you make if the world truly rose up as one?